Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome to episode 216 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. Hey, this is Jason. Today we are back with a wonderful writer who has a delightful first name that you might recognize. I don't know why that tickles me so much. I feel like such a kid. Anyway, our guest today is Jason Rekulak. Jason he's got quite the career in writing, whether it's writing or working as a publisher. And we're going to be hearing all about all of those aspects here coming up in the interview ahead. And Jason's a great guy that I really had a good time talking to. We're going to be discussing advice for newbie writers, empathy for our characters, working in publishing like Jason did for a long time, sticking it out with your writing and your stories, and adding visual elements to our stories, which goes hand in hand with Jason's latest book, Hidden Pictures. And the book is full of pictures made by the characters within the story. So that's a really cool thing. And it's just a great interview. And hopefully, wherever you're watching this right now, you'll be able to see, I'm trying for the first time ever to add additional media to the episode. So probably it could be YouTube would be my best bet, where you're going to be able to take a look at some of the other media. But if you can't see it, if you're listening to this on a podcast, like on Apple iTunes or something like that, then you can always hop over to our social media site at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can see some of the pictures that's included in the book that Jason sent over, and really worth your look. That way you can see what this character is coming up with. It's really something else. But it's a great interview. It's a great chat, and I had a great time talking with Jason. He and I are from that same era, grew up around the same time, so we had a lot of fun just kind of chatting about a lot of that stuff that we could both relate to. Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't also mention Jason has his own game on his website. So make sure at the end of this you are clicking the link in the show notes for his website, and go check out that video game. You got to do it on a computer, so you can't do it on mobile, but it's worth your time. It's a fun little thing. Hey, real quick, I want to give a big shout out to Wayne Smith, who is a listener of the show, and he wrote in a month ago requesting that I reach out to Jason, saying that Jason's books are incredible. And yeah, Wayne, you are right. I had a really good time talking to Jason, so hopefully you enjoy this episode as much as I have. If you are a listener, you have somebody you would like to get on the show, or maybe you're an author and you would like to be on the show, just reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Follow me there and you can reach out to me, or you can contact the show via email at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com. You can also leave me a voicemail by calling 660-851-1146, and I'll make sure to play that on an upcoming episode. Real quick, I also want to make sure to thank our sponsor, Scrivener. They've been with us for a few years now, and we're having a great time with them as a sponsor of the show. It is the writing software that I use every day, so make sure you're listening to this advertisement to hear how you can save 20% on the amazing software. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter Podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. All right, as always, thank you so much to Scrivener for sponsoring the show. I also want to thank Writer's Block Coffee. They're an affiliate of the show, meaning if you click the link in the show notes or if you go right over to Writer's Block Coffee and you use the coupon code Sample Chapter, then the show gets a little bit of something that goes towards production costs. Writer's Block Coffee has 3 delicious flavors to choose from. The Writer's Block Blend. There's also the my personal favorite, the whiskey barrel aged blend that is so good. It's got such a great smell to it. Whenever you brew a cup and you just sit there and hold that, oh gosh, it's so good. And then also there is the Deadline Dark, which is very good when you are staying up late at night, burning the candle at both ends, trying to meet your deadlines. Check out one, check out them all, or order one time, or set it up for automatic shipping each month. But make sure you click that link in the show notes to find out more about Writer's Block Coffee. Lastly, I want to thank my friends at Pop Goes the Culture Network, home to about 10 other incredible shows, all of them fun, all of them pop culture related, and so much good stuff to listen to. So if you are a fan of 70s, 80s, 90s, pop culture trivia, if you like following along with movie and celebrity news that's current, any of that kind of stuff, then make sure you are following one or several of the shows over there at the network. Just click that link in the show notes to find out more. All right, well, without further ado, let's hop on over to my interview with the wonderfully talented Jason Rekulak. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the show. This week, I'm very excited. I got a guy with a very cool name, another Jason for you. So you know he's going to be a good writer. Well, one of us is. I'll put it that way. I think it's probably my guest. But yeah, Jason Rekulak is my guest today. Jason is the author of Hidden Pictures, which is coming out soon, or just came out actually, and The Impossible Fortress, which was a finalist for the Edgar Award. For many years, he was a publisher of Quirk Books, an indie press headquartered in Philadelphia, where he ghost wrote many odd books that may or may not surface on the pages ahead. Today, Jason is an active member of the Writers Guild East and Mystery Writers of America. He still lives in West Philly with his wife and children and way too many pets. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the show, Jason Rekulak.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. And yeah, great first name. I think you're my first Jason on the show.
Oh, well, we're probably about the same age. I think there was a wave of us right around 1971.
Yeah, yes, that's about right. Yep, I know. I had a couple years later, I remember asking my mom, like, man, why didn't you name me Luke? Luke would have been a better name.
Right, yeah, everybody wanted to be Luke.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, man, you got Luke Skywalker, you got Bo and Luke Duke. It's like, man, I mean, come on. She just kind of shook her head. She was like, nope. Oh, well. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Good. And I understand you are a full-time stay-at-home writer as well.
I am now. I worked in publishing for a long time, mostly for not traditional publishing, but I worked for an indie press called Quirk Books. I was publisher there, and it was just 3 people in a room, and it over 18 years, 20 years, it sort of grew to like 25 people in a building,
Wow.
And it was interesting training because I've always been writing, but I needed a way to pay the bills. And so when this company Quirk started, I didn't know what else I was going to do. I didn't have any other skills. I was like, this business has to work. Like, we have to make money. Because this is, otherwise I'm going to Trader Joe's. I don't know what I was going to do, So it was, I don't know that it's the right training grounds for everybody, but it was really, I learned a lot, You end up pitching a lot of books in that job. As the publisher, you're always trying to sell books to people, and book selling is such a useful thing for a writer to do, because, because if you're writing, I mean, there's going to be people selling your book all the time, and if you can make that job easy for them, they'll love you for it. So
yeah, that was the when I first started this show 5 years ago. My initial reaction, like even on day one, I was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna just focus on indie authors because we're the ones struggling and whatever."
Mhm.
And I quickly realized, I think within an episode or two, like what a mistake that was going to be. Although I want to have that platform for independent authors, I realized also that there's a lot of traditional authors who are in the same boat. I mean, they got the deal, but who's going to buy it, and how do they? They're also just telling mom and dad and their friend across the street, hey, I wrote a book and it's
Yeah.
published, but who's going to buy it? And how do I
It's
get?
tough for everybody. It's
Yeah,
tough for everybody. I mean, like apart from like, the John Grishams or whoever, where, they've already climbed
yeah,
that mountain and they have their base. But, there are so many authors who will have like a big splashy debut and then you'll never hear from them again. And that's the norm. That's most people. They can't sell their second book because the first book didn't do well enough.
mhm.
That's super common. Um, and indie authors, I mean, I'm at Flatiron, which is part of Macmillan, and I know the authors, they're struggling with the same things. They're still looking at their Amazon rankings obsessively. They're still
Yeah.
afraid to look at Goodreads because the 1-star reviews are going to be brutal. They're going to be like personal attacks. I mean,
Hmm.
it's tough business. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, that's one of the things I recommend to a lot of the newbies I talk to is like just develop a thick skin and understand it's not personal. Like you're
It's
not.
interesting. You hear that phrase all the time, and you do need a thick skin. But I also feel like part of what makes you a good writer is that you are thin-skinned,
Mm,
and that you're very empathetic. Like you're very sensitive, and you're picking up on like these
yeah.
things, and that's what makes you good. So it's kind of hard to like. You're absolutely right, but like that's why we are so vulnerable,
you
because
know,
um,
that's interesting. You said that. I was just talking with somebody, another author, the other day about empathy, and to my point first was that yeah, you got to be able to not take the judgment of your work so harsh, but still look for a kernel of truth. And it's like if you're hearing it multiple times, you got to examine that.
right.
Uh, but then with the empathy, yeah, we were discussing that. It's like, yeah, I mean, writers have got to get deep, and you've got to have that empathy because even with your villains, if you don't understand the villains' behavior and why they're doing something, then you have nothing more than the classic villain twisting his mustache. I'm just gonna run
Yeah.
you over with a train, and
No, you're
just because he's a
absolutely
bad guy.
right. I mean, the villain doesn't think he's a villain.
Yeah,
Like he's the hero of his own story.
yeah,
And, otherwise, he's just got the mustache and he's tying a woman to the train tracks.
right. Yeah, little did we know growing up that Vader just hated sand. Oh my gosh. So, what was that like for so many years working in it? You said you were there for like 20 years or so in this independent company. And then about 10 years ago, you had the big boom with people discovering Amazon and the indie push that started and all that. What was that like going through that?
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging, but it actually, if you were a young up and coming company with no history, it was actually good for you because, the rules of the industry are being rewritten in this moment. So suddenly, in a way, everyone is being put on an equal playing field, like all of the old connections are becoming irrelevant. So in a way, like it was like the industry was starting over again and everyone was
Yeah.
trying to figure it out at once. So that actually worked to our advantage.
Hmm.
I think we were able to like succeed faster than we could have if the rules in the old system had just stayed in place that whole time, because we were
Yeah.
never going to catch up to like Random House or Simon and Schuster. Not that we ever did, but we were able to take advantage of. Well, it's like that analogy everybody makes about, if you have a tiny ship, you can turn a tiny ship much faster than like a big cruise liner. You know what I
Right.
mean? If
Yeah.
ebooks are now a thing and we have to pivot and Borders goes out of business and we have to pivot as a company of 20 people, you're really nimble. You can pivot faster than Simon and Schuster or HarperCollins.
Sure.
We could pivot tomorrow. We don't have to fire people or hire people or whatever, so it was super exciting. And it's funny, I miss it because, now that I'm writing full time, I use one part of my brain a lot exclusively. But when I had that job, it was a business. So I was using all different kinds of skills. I use like people skills, money skills, math. I do math, business, salesmanship, and that was really satisfying. And I kind of missed that part of it. Like I liked, it did a lot of different things. So it was always, I always felt really good at the end of the day.
Sure. Yeah, no, I can relate to that. I managed a theater for a couple of years and discovered how much I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Not just the day-to-day running the theater and going in and making people happy, coming in to see a movie, but also the promotions and the marketing behind a movie and I had no idea that theaters competed against each other in these marketing campaigns to try and make something up. And so I'm building like the deck of the Enterprise for Star Trek and all sorts of different things. And man, it was such a blast to come up with creative ideas. And that was my output for several years. And I kind of pushed any attempts I'd had at that time for writing, just kind of pushed that aside. It was like, I'm having so much fun with this. And
sounds like a blast. I always wish I worked in a movie theater. When I was a kid, that was the job I wanted more than anything. I worked in a McDonald's, but I was so jealous of the people who work in the movie theaters. And I think it would be so much fun.
Yeah, it was really good. I had a good time with it. Left because my wife was in the military at the time, and that's when I was managing it. And then we transferred to Japan. So left that, and then whenever we came back a couple years ago, I went ahead and went back into it as a backup job, a second job, working nights and just selling popcorn, just cleaning theaters, and not as much fun, but still a little bit of fun anyway. But yeah, I look forward to it. It was good, but by then I was writing and making a concerted effort to do so.
Yeah.
So how about you? How did you make that switch from working with authors to becoming one yourself?
Well, it was never really a switch. I mean, I was always writing. I sort of had like this epiphany when I was 19 that I had to start writing like every day if I was going to get any good. And so I've always done it. I wrote a lot of bad books that are like under my bed. It took me a long time to figure out. I just made a lot of mistakes, and I was pretty shy about it. Like I didn't tell people what I was doing, so I probably didn't take advantage of like opportunities of people who might have helped me because I was like too insecure to like say I even wanted to do it.
Oh, sure.
So I never had anyone helping me, which probably slowed me down, because I was so insecure about it. So I probably have like 4 or 5 books that, were either just complete messes or severely flawed, and what helped me, I think, tremendously along the way was once the company I worked for started doing fiction and I started having conversations with authors about what was wrong with their books. That really helped me zero in pretty quickly on like, what elements a novel needed to be successful and why you looked at so many bad ones, like those were instructive in a way. So, but I mean, again, like this all happened over, my first book came out in 2017. And I was, so, that was probably like 26 years. I mean, it sounds crazy. 26 years into writing, like at night, or getting up early on the weekends. But I don't know. It sounds crazy when I think about it now, but
well, but you stuck it out and followed through with it. I think a lot of authors, I know a lot of the authors I've talked to on the show, I think there's 1 or 2 here and there that have been writing. Their first book was over 10 years. Myself, I mean, mine was 8 years in the works before it finally came out. But I mean, I think we all have that one from way back when. I mean, I'm in my own mind as you were talking about. I'm thinking of one from '96 that I had an idea for, and still to this day, I'm like, I'd like to get back to that idea one of these days.
Yeah.
And I've got a notebook that's about half filled with the characters, the plot, what I want to do with it, and I know most of it's probably not going to work
Yeah.
anymore, but it'd be fun to get back to one of these days too, and that'd be fun to go. Okay, so '96, and it's 22 now. Okay, yeah, it'd be fun to say like, yeah, this is who knows, 30 years by the time I get to it, if I ever get back to it. So,
Right. 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 Yeah. Maybe you will. I mean,
but still, I mean, it's good to have that there, and that with this book, you stuck it out. Now, was that Impossible Fortress?
yeah. Impossible Push is 2017. Um, and that was a tricky book to write a follow-up to because it was sort of a coming of age novel set in the 80s. I wrote it right before Stranger Things came on TV, and I was definitely trying to go for like a Stranger Things kind of vibe without the supernatural element, but I just wanted the book to be like infused in like 80s pop culture.
Yeah.
Um, and but then it was, publishing, there's this pressure to like stay in your lane, once you have a book come out and build your audience. And I was like, well, how do I do that? Like how do I like I wrote a coming of age novel. I can't write another coming of age novel, but what else is like a coming of age novel?
Yeah.
So I actually spent like a year and a half, maybe 2 years writing this epic, massive book that nobody wanted. you know? And it's really painful. And like there's a flaw with the book, but there's parts of it that I just love. Parts of it I think are just like fantastic, but there probably were like one or two hurdles that were going to make it not commercial, and you just would not be able to make this book work. And so that was kind of crushing, um, especially since at that point I'd already quit my job. so, so then I was thinking, okay, I've got to I want to write for an audience, and so I started thinking about what do I like, and I've always loved suspense. I've always loved thrillers. I'm a huge like Alfred Hitchcock fan. Most of the authors I like are writing like thriller realm,
Yeah.
mystery, crime, horror, and so I was like, I'm just going to do that. Like I'm just going to do one of those because like if I have to pick a lane, let me pick a lane where like I would feel comfortable staying for like hopefully 5 or 7 or 10 books.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and so that was sort of the decision that led me down the road toward Hidden Pictures, which
That's
which I ended up
cool.
writing in like 2020, and it just came out a month ago.
Wow. But that's cool, and that's got quite the story to it. I was reading a little bit about it with the fresh out of rehab Mallory Quinn, finding this job as a sitter, and then what's going on with the kid that she's starting to discover or starting to babysit, and yeah, there's a whole lot. I'm trying to like dance around it without spoiling anything, even though there's some really ideal things going on that really makes you raise an eyebrow. Uh,
Mhm.
tell us some more about it.
Yeah, well, um, so the other thing that went into the book was when I worked at this. There's a very long answer to your question. When I worked at this publishing house, one of the things we realized that we had a hard time finding authors to send us their manuscripts, because we were working with like pretty limited budgets, and agents didn't want anything to do with us. And so most of our authors tended to be like indie authors, first time authors, inexperienced authors, sometimes occasionally not very good authors, or authors whose writing hadn't quite, gotten to the point of being like publishable. But I realized one advantage we had was we had really good designers, and I started encouraging us to work like visual elements in the book. So like, for example, one of the novels we did, well, the most famous novel we did was a book called Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I don't know if you've ever seen
Yeah.
that book.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
That guy came to me. His name was Ransom Riggs. He had a collection of these old photos of these kids and they were real photos from like the early 20th century. And the kids just look weird. They look creepy because they're dressed like little adults with their top hats and their monocles, and they've got like weird dolls. And he wanted it to just be an art book. And in talking about it over like the course of a year, kept adding more words to it. First, he was going to write these little rhyming couplets under each photo, like little poems, like little Edward Gorey things. But I kept asking him for more story. I'm like, who are these kids? Do they know each other? Do they live together? Maybe, And then one day I said to him, look, I thought this was going to be an art book with a little bit of text, but I was like, I think I want this to be a novel with a little bit of art. I think we need to flip it. And he's like, yeah, I want that too. I've just been like afraid to say it, like, because I've never written a novel before, And I was like, you got to do it. And that book, it's the best of my knowledge. I mean, there's now like 6 books in the series, but I think the first one, when I left that job, had sold 15 million books,
Yeah.
And it is just a beautifully designed book. The photos look great. The end papers look great. And I took the lessons of that to like a lot of other books. Like we did a book that was set in a haunted IKEA, and it looks like an IKEA catalog, and it uses like the blue and white IKEA colors and like the Futura IKEA font, which is anyone can use that. And so I had this idea of doing, I had these 2 illustrators that I wanted to work with. I was like, we should collaborate on some kind of project. You guys will do the pictures, I'll write the words. And I had this idea of some kind of character whose illustrations start improving. And I couldn't really figure out what the story was. And I probably spent like 3 or 4 months trying to figure out what it was. And then eventually I landed on this idea that there was this 5-year-old boy who was drawing pictures, as 5-year-old boys tend to do. If you ever have little kids, like they're drawing, a lot of them, the ones who are artists, they draw constantly. You've got pictures all over your house, stacks of paper. And at first his pictures are pretty like benign, like rabbits and normal kid stuff. But then he starts drawing like, a man dragging a woman through a forest, or someone burying a body. And his nanny is like, where are these pictures coming from? What is going on here?
Right.
And the parents are kind of like, he's got a beautiful mind, gifted imagine. Obviously the child's gifted, right?
Yeah.
And the babysitter was like, I don't think he's gifted. I think something really weird is happening here. And what I think is fun about the book is that all the art that she finds is reproduced in the book. And so you can sort of play detective alongside of her. Like every time she finds an image, the text stops, we show the image, and you're allowed to study it. And because it's a book, this happens in horror movies all the time. And they only show the image for like a flash of a second, and I always want to like, I grab my remote and I pause it because I like to look at the art. I like to look at like weird kid art.
Yeah.
But with this book, you can linger over it and study it and try to figure out what's going on. And there's like little clues hidden in the illustrations if you're paying attention. And so there's a bit of a mystery to it. There's a supernatural element, because she thinks maybe the kid is like channeling some kind of spirit that's helping him draw these pictures. And a lot of suspense and a thriller. So long answer to the question, but it's a very visual book with I think there's like 75 pages of illustrations, but they're all organic to the story. They're all part of the plot. They're not decorative illustrations.
Okay. That's awesome though. That's awesome. And is this gonna be like part of a series then? You were talking about you made this like giant book.
No, I don't think so. I think it's a standalone. But I'm really interested in the idea of, I'm surprised more books don't have pictures in them,
Yeah.
like, because if you just think about how we're consuming stories now, everyone's looking at their phones, everyone's looking at their screens. There's so much like visual eye candy on the internet, and books, tend to be kind of the same way they've looked for 200 years now, And so I think there's an interesting opportunity. I don't think it's gimmicky. I think there's a way to, some of my favorite books, especially when I was a kid, like if a book had a map in it, I love those maps,
Yeah.
If I was reading like Lord of the Rings or something like that, I love to pore over those maps. And I don't think there's anything like cheap or stupid about it. Like, I don't think it's just for kids. Like, I think, the Charles Dickens, his books used to be illustrated. If you go back to like Victorian times, this was normal, At some point it became a juvenile thing, but it used to be considered, worthy of like adult literature.
Well, and I think you're right. I think it's coming back a little bit. Like I remember growing up, and one of my favorite series to read was Dragonlance,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
every chapter had an incredible picture there that usually had something to do with that chapter ahead,
yeah,
or
yeah,
what's going on. And
yeah.
oh man, I love those. I would sometimes I'd even copy them and blow them up a little bit bigger, or
Yeah.
I had the calendars with the incredible art. But I always loved that, and it's all of those books, and I've ended up collecting them again as an adult,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just so I could have them and reread them. And then picked up some of the audio last year, which was fun to hear some of the names. Like, oh, that's how you say the name.
That's how you
Like,
say it, right?
oh, okay. If I'd have known that 40 years ago, I've been saying it right all this time. But that, I mean, those were a blast to have that art, and it fills in that gap, adds to the imagination of, okay, that's what this looks like. And then
Mhm.
you're going forward, and now you know what the draconians are looking like, and so on. And I think so that's a cool aspect, then, that you're adding something like that into your book. uh I think people were, I don't know, the more I keep more authors I talk to, the more I'm hearing about art being inserted in
Yeah.
here and there. Gosh, I talked to a graphic artist, which, that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. But there was somebody recently I just talked to who they are looking into some of the visual media of writing stories into little like cartoons.
Mhm.
There's websites where you can actually create your own. Well, they have a wealth of characters, scenes, and others, or scenery and whatever, and then you build your story around that, and then you can tell your own story, and then people can watch that and
Oh, cool.
purchase it, and almost like a moving comic book
Yeah.
thing. And I could see something like that coming coming to pass over time, almost like short films.
Yeah. Listen, it's the Wild West right now. I mean, there's new formats for. It seems like every 3 years there's some new thing. Whether it's right now it's TikTok, and then before that was podcasts, and this.
Mhm.
So who knows what's coming down the pike?
Well, speaking of new formats, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention real quick, back on Impossible Fortress, the video game tie-in.
Oh yeah.
And I spent a little time earlier today just kind of like playing around with that. Got
Uh,
my name up on your board.
oh,
And
nice.
all right,
Good
yeah.
job.
So I got up onto sixth place.
Uh-huh.
And believe me, the 80s kid in me was like, okay, let's play again. So I can get my name a little higher up on there. And I was like, oh wait, no, I gotta start making lunch here for too long. But
Yeah.
that was cool. How did that come about?
Well, so the book is about these two teenagers who are creating this video game together called The Impossible Fortress. It's about a lot more than that, but um, I think that was the publisher in me just thinking, well, it would be really cool if you could play this game for real.
Mhm.
Actually, well, here's the first idea. This was a bad idea. Sometimes you have to have the bad idea before you have the good idea. I wanted to, I don't know. So when I was a teenager, I had a Commodore 64, and like I would get these magazines that would come with computer code. And if you typed in all the computer code, it took hours. But if
Yeah.
you typed in all the code, you'd end up with this really simple rudimentary game.
Mhm.
And so, and that is like the sort of world of the book. That's the era of the novel. It's like these kids are just, these dorks are like sitting home on Friday night, just typing in, these basic and assembly language programs, which is what I did when I was a teenager. And I initially wanted to have all that code in the book so that you could type it into a Commodore 64 emulator and play it yourself. But then, like, I was like, at some point it dawned on me, you're writing, you're not thinking about stuff. And at some point I just stepped back. I'm like, you're the only person who has a Commodore 64 emulator. Most readers don't have this. So what you need to do, and the game is going to be really lame by today's standards. So what I ended up doing was finding someone who knew how to program today's machines. And I said, look, I want you to make a game that feels, it should look and feel like it came from that world.
Mhm.
And it has to sort of match the parameters of the game described in the book. And that was this guy named Dan Paquito. And and his wife, and they worked together on it, and they had a lot of fun with it, and it was really a blast to watch that thing come together.
That's so.
I'm not sure how successful it was, like as a marketing vehicle. I think I thought more people would try it than actually did, but the people who love it really love it.
Yeah. Well, it was great, a great tie-in, and it was, to be honest, I just put it on easy so that way I could just give it a shot. But
Yeah.
it was so cool to have that little tie-in, to complete it, and then for it to pop up afterwards and say, "Hey, share your score with your friends on
Yeah.
Twitter, Facebook, whatever." So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do that here on my. I did my author Twitter page, like, "Hey, everybody,
Oh,
I just played this game with this guy. I'm gonna interview later on, so you got to check this out." And then
that's cool.
the Facebook page for the show. So everybody listening, you can click the link in the show notes for Jason's website. But if you're following us on Facebook, you've already seen this post, hopefully, and you can click in there and go play the game and try it out. But it's fun for a few moments. Does it work on mobile? Do you know?
No, it doesn't. That's the thing. It's when we made this game like 5 years ago, and so phones were becoming like sort of dominant form of like computers. But I was like, I wanted to try to replicate like the Commodore 64 experience as much as possible. So I'm like, all right,
Sure.
well, one of the few parameters is you're going to have to be in front of a keyboard. You got to be in front of a laptop or a desktop, because they just didn't have touchscreens back then. So
Yeah.
so that was a compromise we made. I may not. I know there are countless people who've tried to play it on their phones and they're disappointed, and so that may have been a misstep on my part, but I just felt like for purposes of like fidelity and trying to make it feel like a game from 1987, it couldn't
Sure.
be played on a touchscreen. That would just be weird.
Yeah, yeah, and that's fine. That's good. Yeah, if anybody's wanting something for your a good throwback to the old days, I know there's Zork is available on your phone, and
Oh yeah,
that's, oh my gosh, I don't know how many nights you were talking about playing on your Commodore at night. Yeah, I don't know how many nights I spent with my friends drawing out our maps. Like, wait, we went
yeah.
east, and that's where the dragon was. Okay, crap, gotta
No,
go the other
Jason, I
way.
have all those games. I still have the boxes.
Oh my
I have all
gosh.
those. You can get emulators for all those. You can play them free online. All the Infocom games are up.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and there's also a really good podcast that I like called Eaten by a Guru, where these two guys just review. You would love it. They review each game, and it's full of spoilers. Like the first half, they don't spoil anything, and then there's like a spoiler fence that they go over, and they talk about the hardest puzzles and what they struggled with, and it's awesome.
Oh my gosh, I'll have to check it out. So what are you working on now?
Well, right now I'm working on another thriller because I'm going to stay in my suspense lane, and I think it's going to be a book without pictures because I feel like that's just sort of, again, I'm trying to think like a publisher. I feel like this is like a smart move for me. Like I can't just be like the pictures guy. I've got to do like, but I can stay in this category and deliver another thriller that is, I don't want to really pitch it yet because it's still like early days. But there's a couple of common denominators to hidden pictures and a lot that is like new. So I feel like it's a good balance of
Yeah.
familiar and new challenges.
Okay. Kind of sounds like it's in that world, just not a sequel, not there, but
Yeah,
possibly in
no,
the
yeah,
world.
completely unrelated, different, all different characters, different setting, very limited time frame. This book is going to take place over a single weekend, um, but super early days. I'm actually working on a big outline of it right now, so trying to figure it all out.
Very cool. Well, you have to let us know when it's ready so we can help get word out about it, and let everybody know that your new book's ready. Meanwhile, where can people find and follow you?
So my website, jasonrekulak.com, Rekulak. I'm on Instagram. I do most of the social media stuff on Instagram. I don't do Twitter. I sort of half-heartedly do Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. So Instagram is where, and that's just my name. So
Yeah.
you can definitely follow me there.
All right. And we'll make sure to have links for all that in the show notes. Jason, thank you so much for joining me on the show, man. This has been a blast. I have a feeling we could probably there's a lot of topics we could probably go on and on about for quite some time.
Yeah,
But I need to let you get back to your day, and I know the listening audience is awaiting this sample reading. So thank you so much for joining me.
my pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, time for me to step aside with my cup of writer's block coffee and listen to our guest, Jason Rekulak, with Hidden Pictures.
All right, I'm just going to preface my excerpt pretty briefly. This is a scene from chapter 2. All you really need to know before I start reading is that there's a young woman named Mallory. She's from South Philly. She comes from like a blue collar kind of background. And she's had a troubled past. We don't know exactly what's gone wrong for her, but she's going out to this very nice, very affluent suburb called Springbrook to work, to be interviewed for a job as a nanny. There's a family, a mom and dad with a 5-year-old boy named Teddy. They've been in Barcelona for 2 years, but they've just come back to the United States and they're looking for a nanny to watch Teddy for the summer. And prior to this scene, Mallory, the babysitter, she's interviewed by the mother, and the mother says something like, "Hey, let's go sit down with Teddy, see how you two get along." And so that is the scene. The child is sprawled on the rug with a spiral-bound pad and some yellow number 2 pencils. At my arrival, he looks up and flashes a mischievous smile, then immediately returns to his artwork. "Well, hello there, Teddy. Are you drawing a picture?" He gives his shoulders a big, exaggerated shrug, still too shy to answer me. "Honey, sweetheart," Caroline says, "Mallory just asked you a question." Again, Teddy shrugs, then he moves his face closer to the drawing until his nose is practically touching the paper, like he's trying to disappear inside it. Then he reaches for a pencil with his left hand. "Oh, I see you're a lefty," I tell him. "Me too." "It's a common trait in world leaders," his mother says. "Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, they were all left-handed." Teddy maneuvers his body so I can't see over his shoulders. I can't see what he's working on. "I'll tell you a funny story," Caroline says. "The whole time we lived in Barcelona, we couldn't get Teddy to pick up a pencil. We bought him markers, finger paints, watercolors. He showed no interest in art. But the moment we moved back to the States and move into this house, suddenly he's Pablo Picasso. Now he draws like crazy." Caroline lifts the top of the coffee table, and I see it doubles as some kind of storage chest. She removes a sheaf of paper that's an inch thick. "My husband teases me for saving everything, but I can't help myself. Would you like to see?" "Oh, definitely," I tell her. Down on the floor, Teddy's pencil has stopped moving. His entire body is tensed up. I can tell that he's listening carefully, that he's focusing all of his attention on my reactions. "Ooh, this first one is really nice," I tell Caroline. "Is this a horse?" "Yes, I think so." "No, no, no," Teddy says, springing off the floor and moving to my side. "That's a goat because he has horns on his head, see? And a beard. Horses don't have beards." Then he leans into my lap and turns the page, directing my attention to the next drawing. Soon Teddy is relaxing my arms and resting his head on my chest. I feel like I'm cradling a large puppy. His body is warm and he smells like laundry that's fresh out of the dryer. Caroline sits off to the side, watching us interact, and she seems pleased. The drawings are all pretty standard kid stuff. Lots of animals, lots of smiley-faced people on sunny days. Teddy studies my reaction to every picture, and he soaks up my praise like a sponge. And at this point, I'm going to interrupt my reading. I'm just going to show you what happens in the book. I mentioned the book is interspersed with illustrations. This is a great example. So at this scene, the text stops, and we get to sort of join Mallory in looking at these pictures. So the first thing we see is like a full page of Teddy's goat. And then you turn the page, and you're in the stack of drawings with her. There's the weeping willow tree that Teddy talked about. We see 2 birds in a bird bath. You turn the page, there's 2 more pictures. There's a boy with a teddy bear. There's a boy with a rabbit. Then turn the page again. There's a boy with a kind of like wraith. It looks like a tall woman with long dark hair. And these are all illustrated like a 5-year-old drew them. So it's done like in a pretty unnerving, unsettling style. You see the pictures, and then we just jump right back into the story. Caroline seems surprised to find this last picture in the stack. "I meant to set this one aside," she says, but now she has no choice but to explain it. "This is Teddy and his special friend. Anya," Teddy says. "Her name is Anya." "Right, Anya," Caroline says, winking at me, encouraging me to play along. We all love Anya because she plays with Teddy while Mommy and Daddy are working. I realize Anya must be some kind of weird imaginary playmate, so I try to say something nice. I bet it's great having Anya around, especially if you're a little boy in a new town and you haven't met the other children yet. Exactly. Caroline is relieved that I the situation so quickly. That's exactly right. Is Anya here now? Is she in the room with us? Teddy glances around the den and returns to his drawing. No. Where is she? I don't know. Will you see her later tonight? I see her every night, Teddy says. She sleeps under my bed, so I can hear her singing.
All right, there you go, everyone. That was Jason Rekulak reading a sample chapter from his latest book, Hidden Pictures. That book and Jason's website, everything about Jason is all available in the show notes, so click those links down there so you can find out more and follow him. Get over to his website and check out that video game. Don't forget to also check out our sponsors, affiliates, and podcast friends, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next week when we're back with a brand new author, an all new book, and a brand new sample chapter. Take care, everybody. We're going to see you again real soon.